Chapter 2. My words fly up, my thoughts remain below. Words without thoughts never to heaven go. William Shakespeare. Joe could no longer see Michael, but he was still standing there. Michael hankered to tell Joe the answer. If he only understood the entire story, things could so easily change. However, the laws of the kingdom had been set up 2 millennia ago. In most trials, it appears the home team has the advantage. Michael firmly believed it ain't over until it's over. He visualized the picture Joe had hanging in his office. It portrayed a frog partway in a crane's open mouth, holding onto the crane's neck for dear life. Michael's smile was soon accompanied by a small chuckle. He placed a thought of that picture in Joe's mind. Remember, it ain't over until it's over. Michael's liquid blue eyes flashed as he pondered these things. Somehow I must get Joe to realize that there is another world that exists at this very moment in the 10th dimension. I wished we hadn't promised not to interfere. Joe must be finding things more complex now. So many things are invisible to Joe's eyes, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. The invisible world influences everything. I have to get Joe to see that there is a way out of his unspeakable pain. I can see him somewhere in the future. He looks much better than he looks right now. Truthfully, there are many new and delightful stories waiting to be written. Joe, it's up to you. I know what you think. I hear it just as if we were speaking to one another. What was visible to Joe's eyes was only a very tiny part of what science knows. Joe needed to discover the spiritual quantum world. These conceptual ideas not only affect the physical, but also beliefs about what is seen. I know that Joe doesn't want to keep having negative things happen. Why does he keep thinking they will? Why do humans have such negative truth talk? Can't they see they are creating their own future? From the teachers he'd studied under, and even the religious leaders of his church, Joe had learned to believe only what he could see. Joe hadn't given much thought to the unseen world. As the saying goes, seeing is believing. Joe trusted his 5 senses. If it wasn't spelled out right in front of his nose, to Joe, it was hocus pocus. Now it might be a good time to fill you in on how this event evolved. As they say, the devil is in the details, a cliché that rings true. Thinking back, I was with Joe on his first day at UC Berkeley. Joe was an attractive, impressive young man, with a rough, rugged look, the sweetest smile, and just a little bit over 6 feet tall. His shoulder-length auburn hair was curly, and his bell-bottom pants were ragged. Some thought Joe should be the lead in the school musical Jesus Christ Superstar. Not only did he look like Jesus most of the time, but he kidded that he acted like him too. There weren't many other college students that attended Mass on Sunday at St. Joseph the Worker. Joe was irreproachable and respectable. Having attended American Martyrs Parochial School as a child, he had developed the habit of praying every morning. He couldn't think of a better way to start his day. His prayers set a positive tone. His actions spoke more than his words. Attending the early Mass each Sunday gave him more time to play. After all, God didn't expect him to become a monk. When he graduated from Berkeley, he wanted to participate in the stream of community life, sharing the joy and sorrows within. Some of his college buddies did foolish things, doing it their own ways and getting themselves into trouble. Drugs and rampant sex were everywhere. Abortion and rehab followed. Then they would complain to Joe, "Why did God do this to me?" Joe's answer was always, "Are you kidding? God didn't shove the drugs in your mouth." "What am I going to do?" they'd ask. "You're smart. You must realize that you got what you deserved. Tomorrow is a new day. Try reading your Bible. Just take a better path and things will change." He wondered why he was so wise. He guessed it was because he had such a high IQ. To him, holiness was the rejection of evil temptations. Joe's life was full of love, friendships, success, and on Sunday morning, even God had his place. His life was full of endless possibilities and bright tomorrows. I guess now would be a good time to introduce you to Grace. Joe's friendship with Grace began when they attended preschool. They both grew up in Manhattan Beach. In their high school days, they would occasionally run into each other at local downtown spots or while jogging on the beach. Grace was a classic beauty. Grinning as she talked deepened the dimples in her cheeks, and her bright blue eyes twinkled as she quickly gave Joe the once-over. Grace usually wore shorts, a pale blue t-shirt, with her shoulder-length, sandy, sun-streaked blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. She had a warm golden tan that came from the California sun. They would say hello and head on their way as Joe's thoughts raced. Wow, that Grace Ross is a fox! There was something about her that pulled his gaze back. Panache. Though she wore beach attire, she had it. Confidence gave Grace her own brand of style. It appealed to him as much, well, nearly as much as a good football game. Seeing her made his heart race 1,000,000 miles a minute. Yes, indeed. She had endless possibilities. Grace's parents were both lawyers. When Grace was turning 2, they decided one child was enough. How could any child be better? They enjoyed being parents, but more than one child would make life too complicated. Additionally, they both cherished their freedom to travel and ability to afford a beachfront home. Back then, their choice was rare. As an only child, Grace's best friends were like sisters. They seldom argued, and they shared the same interests. Despite being a little self-centered, Grace was extremely loyal. Her friends were everything. Grace's closest confidant was her grandfather. His Scottish heritage imbued him with a most feisty nature, yet he was strangely calm most of the time. His principles were impeccable, and his integrity had enabled him to prosper in all he put his hands to. He was her role model. If you got him talking on anything Scottish, you never knew when the conversation would end. He was a descendant of George Ross, and his family had come to America for religious freedom. He took great pride in telling anyone who would listen that his great, and then he would stop and say, "Oh, you know, way back during the Revolutionary War, he had affixed his signature to the Declaration of Independence." Grace found herself quoting his favorite saying, "The right thing isn't always popular, and the popular thing isn't always right." He was the kind of grandfather every kid wants to have. When she needed a playmate, he was up for endless games of Clue, Life, or Monopoly. As she grew older, he listened whenever she needed to talk about anything, from boys to gossiping girls. He was continuously interested in anything she undertook and constantly encouraged her to pursue her dreams. But perhaps what Grace remembers most is her grandfather's special smell. It is hard to describe in relation to other scents, because it is unlike anything else that ever existed. She could only explain it by the memories it brought forth when she breathed it in. Peppermint, Christmas, Old Spice, fresh brewed coffee, and suntan lotion. This scent instantly evoked an exhilarating sensation of a day spent at the beach, or an evening curled up on the couch listening to him read aloud her favorite stories. After attending Grace's high school graduation, he developed a few health concerns, and as a result began using a cane. Late one summer evening, he became dizzy and staggered to the bathroom. The next day, Grace's mother found him, laying cold and stiff on the bathroom floor. Grace's heart ached. She wondered how others coped with such feelings. They were devastating. Tears, bewilderment. How would she ever find peace again? The world seemed so difficult. Thankfully, the fall semester was about to begin. The first person to catch Joe's eye at freshman orientation was Grace. Spotting her from across the room, he wondered if she would go out with him. Walking over to her, he casually asked, "Hi, how was your summer? Why didn't you tell me you got into Berkeley? What's your major?" She was surprised when his full-on stare made her heart beat faster. Flipping her hair back, she shifted her angle so her gaze was locked in on his face. "Journalism. Someday I want to write a New York Times bestseller. How about you?" she replied. Her smile and friendly body language seemed to indicate her interest in him. It was now time to make his move. He remembered seeing her family eating at Old Venice. There was a good chance she liked Italian food. He tried to focus on her eyes. He didn't want her to see him staring at her body. She might think twice about going out with him. The best kind of first date is one where it is easy to talk, get to know each other, and have fun. Trying to act casual and confident, he flashed his earmark smile. Just standing near Grace made it happen. Joe's heart raced. He could still talk around her, but his thoughts raced. "Hey, wake up. This girl is perfect for you. Ask her out before someone else does." "I'm following in my dad's footsteps as a business marketing major. I hear there will be an Ambrosia concert tonight. Would you like to go? Some of my friends from the dorm are going, and we thought we would go for a pizza after it's over." "Sounds good. Can I bring my roommate Annie?" "Sure. We'll stop by your dorm room at about 3, and we can all walk over together." Laughing and having fun came so easily to them. Ironically, it was their first fight which made Joe realize they were meant for each other. One night Grace was not her usual perky self. Shades of sorrow from her grandfather's death lingered. Everything Joe said seemed to rub her the wrong way. Then they had a dilly of an argument over whether a woman's place was in the home raising kids. After all, the 70s had ushered in so many changes. Feeling frustrated, Joe stood to leave. Grabbing his arm, Grace declared, "You can't go. I won't be able to sleep if we don't come to some mutual agreement." Instantly, they both said, "Never go to sleep angry." So instead of leaving, Joe stayed and talked with Grace for 2 more hours until they worked things out. There was no point in dating Grace if the issue wasn't resolved. Joe wanted the woman he married to be the person who raised his children. No ifs, ands, or buts. Joe felt women were pressured into feeling they wouldn't be successful unless they had a career. This wasn't Joe's opinion. Being a parent is a huge responsibility, one that gives parents the privilege of influencing their children's lives in so many ways. "Surely you don't want our children to ride the school bus home, unlock the door to an empty house, and fix their own snack," Joe lamented. "Everyone will think I'm not capable of taking care of my family. My mom says the thing that brought her the most happiness was her 5 children. She couldn't imagine any job that was more rewarding. I just figured when I got married, my wife would want to be home with our kids. I'd like to work, at least part-time, because it's interesting and stimulating and part of my identity. It will make me, I hope, a better mother. Writing is like a piece of my soul. It takes me on a journey to new, amazing places. Without it, I would be lost," Grace sighed. Eventually, a compromised plan emerged. Other than journaling, Grace would put her writing on hold. They decided that Grace would stay home while the children were small, perhaps until the youngest one was in kindergarten. Then, if Grace still wanted a career, they would address the issue at that time. The 3 warriors had been at their post watching. Hovering above and nestled in the corner, they were bold and brilliant. Joe and Grace didn't notice them. Most humans were unaware of their presence. Nothing was said, but you could tell they were thinking, pondering the effects this event might hold on the future. Compromise. A word that doesn't usually work as well as people publicize it does. Grace is the sort of woman who lives for others. I wish I could warn her that blind commitment to Joe is setting her up for a potential trap. This trap will appear when the excitement of romance has worn off. Yes, courtship was a time when young lovers sow seeds which grow up in 10 to 20 years into domestic hatred. I wonder if she will be happy looking back over her life, or will she feel cheated? Time will tell, but as they mature, we will have to try to help them resolve this issue in a peaceful manner. Still, Grace believed there was another possibility. In her spare time, she could pen an article for Vogue or a best-selling novel. After all, how much work could children be? As much as Grace longed for a career, she also craved a large family, something she felt she had missed in her own childhood. By spring semester, Jo caught an incurable case of the love bug. To be in love for the first time introduced Jo to a new and mesmerizing array of emotions. This enchanting sensation left a deep mark on Jo's heart. They sang songs together and went to the movies. A refined friendship developed because they truly liked each other. They never ran out of words and talked about everything. As they laughed, their eyes twinkled from the joy of being together. The way he looked at her, well, he was definitely starstruck. After graduating from UC Berkeley with his MBA in business, he proposed to the love of his life, Grace Emily Ross. The only thing left to determine was where they would live. Yes, he had done it the proper way. Jo was a man of tradition. Before proposing to Grace, he went to Robert, Grace's father, to ask his permission for her hand in marriage. He expressed his desire to spend the rest of his life with Grace. Robert quickly gave his blessing. Grace dreamed of a romantic proposal, and she definitely got it from Jo. Easter was Grace's favorite holiday, probably because of all the jelly beans and candy her family gave out at the annual Easter egg hunt. Having purchased a giant hot pink plastic Easter egg, he placed it in the garden of his parents' home. He invited Grace out onto the deck for a cup of morning coffee. Of course, Grace noticed the egg. How could she miss something hot pink? Jo picked it up while Grace was saying, "Open it up, I wonder what's inside." Nestled inside the egg was a classic Tiffany & Company 1-carat emerald-cut diamond engagement ring. It twinkled in the bright sunlight, just as it had when his grandmother, Mary Ellen Moretti, wore it. The face of the classic Tiffany ring was surrounded by a row of glittering round diamonds. The band was white gold, delicate and elegant. It was a traditional style that Grace adored. "It's so pretty," Grace whispered. "Do you like it? It's beautiful." She stared into his eyes. Jo reached for her hand and slid the ring into place on her finger. He held her hand out, and they both examined the sun-drenched ring sparkling against her skin. It was magnificent. "A perfect fit," he said confidently. "That's nice. It saves us a trip to the jeweler." Grace could hear some strong emotion burning under the casual tone of Jo's voice, and she stared into his face. The love he had for her, it was there in his eyes. Jo was glowing. His angelic face shone brilliantly with joy. Jo struggled, trying to find the right words. His heart was fluttering like pistons in a race car. Jo got down on one knee and proposed. "Grace Ross." He looked at her with his impossibly long lashes and hazel eyes. "When I think about you, I know that no one else will ever hold my heart the way you do. I promise to love you forever, every day of my life. Will you marry me?" There were many things Grace wanted to say, romantic things. But with a teary smile, the only word that came was a heartfelt, "Yes." She couldn't wait to tell her parents and friends about Jo's sweet proposal. While the proposal was a big deal, Grace's reaction was just as important. "Hallelujah," he said. He took her left hand, eyeing the ring one